I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
I'm Russell Goldman.
And you're listening to Deep Cut.
Fanfare. On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss a director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view the movies as they may want us to.
But not today. Today is a very special day that all stemmed from something I sort of hate tweeted earlier this week about Sundance. And more on that later. But it is a pleasure to welcome back to the podcast the esteemed director and our dear friend, Russell Goldman.
Hey, guys. Thank you for being back. I had a 2-year ban on the show, so I'm glad that it's I'm glad it's finally waived.
Yeah.
Ban being short for Batman, of course.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. We had an absolute blast talking about one of the most popular films we've ever covered on the podcast, Zack Snyder's Justice League, with you. So today, however, we turned the dial on the American film industry back all the way to the other direction as we are covering the premiere festival for independent films in the U.S., the Sundance Film Festival. So this year's festival took place last week, as always, at Park City, Utah, and saw the premiere of numerous narrative and documentary features and short films. Russell was so kind to offer to talk to us about the films he saw at the festival and also chat about what is up with the state of American indie filmmaking today. But first of all, Russell, how was the festival this year? Could you tell us a bit about being there and seeing the movies and just festival fever?
Absolutely. This was my first year attending in person ever. I had done the 2021 and 2022. Crazy to think that there were 2 years that were online exclusive. I watched a lot of those movies online. The other hat that I wear as an executive suggests some awareness of what is happening among independent filmmakers and voices is useful to know about. So I attended online for the last couple of years, attended in person this year. There was also an online component. And I think you'll see, especially the movies that are more logged than some on Letterboxd, also had an online component where I think for general public, you could buy a ticket to a movie for $20 a piece. Not every film was available online, but I think most were. And that certainly helped keep the festival accessible for a global audience, as well as anyone who was afraid of getting sick in Park City and 8-degree weather, of which I know several people that did.
That's really great. I hope that they continue this practice because I feel like it's been a big debate the past few years whether or not we should keep the online portions of film festivals because film festivals want to be an exclusive, like, premiere-like thing, but I think accessibility to all kinds of people is really important in seeing films. So I would say that this is a good direction that Sundance is taking if they choose to continue to do this in the years to come.
Yeah, the way that they went about it this year, I think, was smart, where the movies that were available at home were for a quote-unquote second screening window. So if a movie premiered in person on Friday, then I think that you couldn't start accessing it for a couple days at home. So it was still like during the festival, but it got to have an in-person response and like immediate buzz or lack of buzz before it went online. And I think it helps because a lot of people can only stay or can only afford to stay for a few days, and the festival is like a week long, if not more. And if you go home after going, you can watch a lot more movies, which is what I did. And some stuff plays better in theaters. Some stuff at the end of a 12 movie run over 4 days certainly plays better at home. But there was a pretty wide variety this year for sure.
How many films did you see online and like offline or whatever?
That's a great question. I think I've averaged 3 or 4 movies per day for like probably 8 days. That does include seeing Knock at the Cabin this week and Virgin Suicides, neither of which were part of Sundance as part of the average. But I think it was certainly the most I'd ever seen of a Sundance lineup, and I still miss stuff. Like I think that the movie that probably got the most universally positive response, Celine Song's Past Lives, which is an A24 film, had 2 in-person screenings. There might have been more after a lot of people left, but no online component. So I have not yet seen that one.
Be sure to add that to our watch list on Letterboxd. Out of the films that you saw at the festival, could you maybe talk about your few favorites that you had? We have a list of your films up. I know a few of them you've given hearts to on Letterboxd, but you're being pretty like sly about saying like this is my favorite. So I don't know. Care to share?
That's a funny way to phrase it. I think that there were like 3 or 4 that I really, really, really liked. There's another tier of like stuff that I thought was like solid, and I think a lot more movies fell into that. And then only a few like stinkers. Like I think that there were not a ton of things that I viscerally disliked, but all the things I did like, I guess, were on the slightly stranger side. I really liked this movie by Laura Moss called Birth Rebirth, which was one of the first midnight movies that played. Even the premise itself is kind of, there's only so much I think you'll want to learn about it before you watch. It's a modern take on Frankenstein. It's kind of a horror film. I think it really ends up being this two-hander character study. It's creepy and it's gross and it's very funny. And I think it has like a great wit and like a real understanding of an ambition to save the people that you love. That's going to be on Shudder at some point. They haven't dated that yet, so I highly recommend checking that out. Another movie that I was very excited to see, and I liked apparently more than a good amount of people, was this movie by Alice Englert called Bad Behaviour, starring Jennifer Connelly and Alice Englert as a mother-daughter fractured relationship story. It is a dark, kind of weird, caustic comedy. Most of it follows Connelly at a retreat in Oregon with this new age leader named Elon, which is an unfortunate timing, played by Ben Whishaw, which is,
Love Ben.
A man that I've decided he's also in a really good movie at Sundance this year by Ira Sachs called Passages.
I'm so excited for that one.
I can pivot to that one in a second.
Sachs is back.
Sachs is back.
Yes. But you can talk more about Jane Campion's daughter's Alice Englert's film.
Not to out a Nepo baby.
Not to out another one.
Not to out a Nepo baby. Whishaw it's a small part. He plays a cult leader. I have a theory that I don't think that Ben Whishaw can play a less than good person. Even if the character as written is like a piece of shit. I can't think of any characters he's played that are like awful. That's not who you go to. You don't go to Paddington Bear for him to play an awful person, I guess. But I do think that even in a relative cliche like that character type, you do probably believe that he's one of the good ones, or at the very least he is like, maybe a little bit eccentric, but maybe a good person underneath all the bullshit. I enjoyed that film. I hope that everyone else has a chance to check it out pretty soon. I think Jennifer Connelly is like absolutely incredibly funny in it, and very committed. And there's a supporting part played by Dasha Nekrasova, who everyone might know from as the director and star of Scary and 61st, supporting character on Succession now. Very controversial figure online. And I think that the movie is very aware of the polarization people feel about her, and uses that to really wonderful effect. So that was, I would say, an underrated movie that I hope that people kind of come around to once it's done its festival runs.
Russell, are you at liberty to share your run-in with aforementioned Nekrasova?
Oh, yeah, I can share that part. So about the Sundance experience, and I know especially that's part of the reason why I'm here, is that Wilson and I were talking about that online. It's very industry forward, and the way that people share spaces is like, it's not going to be out in the snowy 9-degree weather. It's in these rooms called like the Chase Sapphire Lounge. It's all sponsored, like meeting spaces like that. And there was a party for Bad Behavior that was hosted there, and the vibes really picked up, I will say, when a bunch of middle-aged to older women started dancing to what I would say is, I wish I had his name so I could shout him out, a very good DJ, and brought more and more people in, a lot of younger people in to dance with them, including, I think one of them like literally pulled me in. I was just like kind of watching and in a delighted daze. And then I remember turning to my left, and Dasha was dancing with them as well, and she seemed like she was having a lovely time. If you get the chance to go to Park City, it's a lot of stuff like that where I would say the best moments are when people get just loosened up or tipsy enough to start, cool it on the networking and the pressure to kind of perform as a impressive individual for whatever reason you're attending Sundance, and just kick it and have fun. That was one of my favorite non-movie moments, because it was a group of women that just really wanted to dance. That enthusiasm was infectious.
It is Sundance.
It is Sundance.
Okay. I sort of want to hear more about the new Ira Sachs movie that everyone is talking about.
It was an interesting mix of, like, I would say later in the weekend and like going into Monday, there were the premieres of a lot of movies by directors whose names seem synonymous with Sundance. Like Nicole Holofcener had a new movie. Corey Finley, who I guess has only been there once, had a new movie. And then Ira Sachs has been there many times. And he comes with this movie Passages, which I've definitely seen Little Men.
Great
as
movie.
far as my Ira Sachs bona fides. It's a really strong movie. This one is set in France. It is effectively about, I guess I could generously describe it as a love triangle between this filmmaker played by
Franz
Rogowski, right?
Yes, who is phenomenal in it. And then he is dating Ben Whishaw, and then starts sleeping with Adele Exarchopoulos.
Hot.
Am I getting that right?
Exarchopoulos? I'm not sure.
Exarchopoulos?
Apologies to Adele Exarchopoulos, who we all remember from Blues the Warmest Color. They become an item. So effectively, Ben Whishaw is like, okay, like, I guess we'll sell our house, like, in the country, like. And then as soon as Franz goes, kind of deeper in a relationship with Adele, he kind of wants back with Ben Whishaw again. And you just get the sense that this is a portrait of a very chaotic bisexual, a asshole film director who doesn't fully know what he wants. I think one of the biggest laugh lines in the movie was just him saying, after, a lot of these kinds of emotional exchanges have happened, just him saying, like, I am confused. It's a lovely comedy. I believe Mubi has picked it up, which is
cool.
Cool, because I know they're early in their acquisition run.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. It feels like Sachs experimenting with a more Euro style of filmmaking. There's a lot of long takes. There's a lot of just letting the performances play out in, a corner of the screen, and you almost feel like a voyeur to it. There are a couple sex scenes that are some of the best that I have seen filmed.
Wow.
It's high praise.
Yeah. Because we all know how much insert joke here. The way that they are framed, I'm excited for you guys to, as Sachs heads yourself, get the chance to see this movie. They do feel like private moments that these two characters are having, while very intense and graphic, and the camera isn't really hiding any body parts from you, but also it has this sweetness. And I think that comes from the performances, as well as like just the right kind of angle that Sachs finds. And the two kind of like big sex scenes in the movie are like both designed to like show Franz's relationship to each of these other characters and like the intimacy that he feels for them at that moment in time, the narrative. So that's a lovely movie. I think that one has grown in my mind quite a bit. The last one that immediately comes to mind, Infinity Pool, is a lovely movie that's already out in theaters.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that film. It's going to be a divisive one, but the only other one I wanted to bring up, because it feels like it's a movie that kind of feels like a Sundance movie to me, but in this case, I mean that very well, is this movie A Little Prayer, written and directed by Angus MacLachlan, who made Junebug, which was at Sundance like almost 20 years ago. And it has two really, really lovely performances. One from David Strathairn, who is, kind of just a boss level character actor, whose work we all love and recognize him from many, many movies. And Jane Levy, who we remember from TV shows and movies, and like hasn't really had I would say an indie film showcase quite like this one. So that movie might seem a little bit sleepy, or it might seem a little bit like this one's just for old people. Sony Pictures Classics, which knows how to court the old people.
Yes, they do.
Sure does.
That picked this movie up. So I fully expect to see Strathairn in the Best Actor top 5 next year with their boost. But it's a really lovely movie. It's very it really appreciates and understands its characters, which I think any good indie drama should aim to do. So that's my movie roundup.
Yes.
I don't have to or want to talk about the movies that I don't like, because
Yeah.
who wants to be mean?
Exactly.
Yep. I have to ask about this film, Drift, because it's directed by Anthony Chen, who's like the film director darling of Singapore. And it's his first English language film that he did not write. I just want to know about it because I forgot he was making a film. And I was like, oh yeah, he has a film at Sundance. And he's working with
Cynthia Erivo.
actors who are not from Singapore or Malaysia for the first time as well. So I'm kind of curious because I saw that you saw it.
I did see it. I did not have a huge response to it, but it's a difficult movie just as far as subject matter, and I'm not familiar with. I was not really familiar with a lot of Chen's other work. Cynthia Erivo plays a Liberian refugee, and she's like surviving on a Greek island. She was like a very wealthy daughter of a government loyalist. You see in some flashbacks kind of alluding to how her life fell apart. And she has this friendship with a American tour guide played by Leah Shawkat, who I always love. That there's something that happens with independent film where I appreciate that pretty much like for budget reasons, for storytelling reasons, like they all end up being around that hour and a half mark, which for a festival is lovely. And then when you see a movie, that especially one that you might not like as much, that like goes to or approaches the 2-hour mark, you're like, oh boy, because everything in a festival setting, and I think anyone would agree with this, like feels like a longer sit than it would if you're just going to a theater one day or putting it on at home. In this movie at 90-ish minutes, felt pretty slight to me. It feels like a short film as far as our understanding of this character and the place that it ends on. There wasn't anything about it that I like disliked. It just didn't really stand out to me as much. Especially like I was very intrigued by the premise, and I think you're expecting a really emotional experience and like kind of like a barn burner performance, and it's very quiet. And I think that there are merits to that, but like compared to other movies that I saw that were also very quiet, it didn't quite. There's another lovely movie that I want to shout out that was in the next section called Fremont, which is about an Afghan immigrant who was living in Fremont, California, working at a fortune cookie factory. Greg Turkington from On Cinema at the Cinema plays her psychiatrist. He's like almost the second lead of the film. It's a really unique, like telling a story about an Afghan immigrant with the tone of a Jim Jarmusch movie. I think is really cool and fun, and everyone's really good in it. Jeremy Allen White has like a showstopper scene near the end of the movie that is really lovely. If anyone likes The Bear, definitely check this movie out. But that movie is, I would not describe it as slight. It is very removed. It's something that I think you want to let wash over you, as opposed to something that you're kind of like on the edge of your seat, because that's not the story they're telling. And I think sometimes that works a little bit better than others for me. And I would say that was the case for Drift.
That sounds great.
Thanks for talking about these films that you liked, Russell.
Yeah.
Before we close out, I think I sort of wanted to talk about the state of American indie filmmaking, and Sundance being a reflection of the American indie filmmaking market, because this all started because I subtweeted the Letterboxd social media video that they did where they asked people at the festival what their top 4 was, and they were just all like existing within the American or white European canon. And I was like, if this is the people that are attending Sundance, I don't want to go anymore. but
Does it hit too close to home, Wilson?
it is a hit too close to home. I was a little scared, but I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna tweet it. I was like sleep deprived, about to get on a flight, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna do it. I just want to say that this annoys me because I don't know. But adds on to my idea that I feel like Sundance has sort of garnered this tradition of filmmakers making the same type of Sundance Fair like year after year,
Even stylistically.
narratively, even like all around. And I was wondering what you thought of that, Russell, as being someone who watched the festival the past 3 years and went this year. If you have any thoughts on whether things are starting to get stale or people are finding new directions in our general regular Sundance Fair.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's something very interesting about the role that Letterboxd, the increasing role that Letterboxd, I think, has played in the discourse of Sundance movies. Like almost now, I feel like more than in previous years, or, you know, in years where I did not attend, but you kind of hear about movies that make bigger splashes that are picked up for a lot of money by somebody, where you might see reviews for them, you might see interviews with them, and maybe it's just a matter of my own social media, you know, not showing me reviews as much. But I feel like a lot of the immediate responses, the first responses that you get to these movies, are the hundreds of people that see the movies in person or online and get to log them on Letterboxd, get to leave reviews with them. I have conflicting feelings about that. I think that you end up seeing a lot of younger people, and that's any younger person who is excited about movies is like, that's awesome to me, and like I want to kind of start there in the conversation. I think that you end up seeing maybe audience members that might not know a style as well, or might not know a director's body of work as well, and they're, because of social media, they get to set the initial tone for how the movie is received. And in many cases, this kind of ties into my other kind of broader observation about Sundance. For the smaller movies, for something like Fremont or Drift, where reviews really matter, and like critics that are going to go to bat for something really matters.
And sometimes these are movies that haven't been picked up yet as well. Like they don't have a distributor.
Yeah, I'd say the buyers are probably looking for any reason to barter down as far as price for a movie that they might be interested in. Or in the case of, you know, immediate reactions on Letterboxd that are kind of maybe a little bit more spur of the moment, maybe a little bit more like gut reactions, like it's easy for them to get valued increasingly. Maybe not as much as a respected film critic, but I'd say especially with the increasing democratization of Sundance, you are able to more just like express your opinion about a movie as soon as you see it. Hopefully you do it with some respect for the filmmakers and the journey that the movie is on, because Sundance is a very industry forward festival. There are a lot of sponsorships. There are a lot of partners in Hollywood that are funding different elements of it. So you end up with the movies that you probably hear about them that get big acquisitions are like movies produced by, major filmmakers, or have, major production company money behind them and have movie stars in them. And like those movies will be fine at the end of the day. But it is, without naming any movies, it does feel disparaging and a bit of a bummer for young people on Letterboxd to set a negative tone for movies that just want a chance to live and want a chance to, make an impression beyond this initial festival, because there are many movies over the last however many years Sundance has been going on, almost 40, that picked up momentum after the festival that weren't a major acquisition and a major like kind of splashy title in Park City, but like generated some life well beyond, like movies that you might not even are aware premiered at Sundance because they really came on the radar later. So it's a unique moment where I think that the increased accessibility of the movies is overall really great, but it does, and maybe this is just me as an industry person, your words matter online more than you might think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you are in the specific video that I'm sure Wilson will link as part of this episode,
Yes, I will.
if you are one of those young people on Letterboxd who are going, I would just give the films that you might not like as much some grace, while obviously write your 5-paragraph or whatever thing about the movie that you love. I was unexpectedly picked up in a Letterboxd roundup on Twitter about Infinity Pool, and I'm glad that I'm glad I loved the movie. I presume that's why they picked up my little capsule review or whatever. Yeah, your words are important, and everyone is just trying to get their movies seen by the rest of the world. And
yeah. As a previous guest, Andrew On, said on the podcast, a lot of directors have burner Letterboxd accounts, so you better watch what you say on Letterboxd.
Yeah, Federico Fellini's coming for you.
From the grave.
Yeah, it's an interesting, you guys I think might identify more on but you all work in film in different ways too. I find it of increased, if I'm going to quote unquote shit talk something online, I better really be punching up.
Yep.
It better be I think that's why it's very easy to do that with, I'm not going to name a superhero brand, but it's easy to do that with superhero-esque tentpoles, because you're I'm one person. This doesn't really mean anything. These things are going to live forever, apparently. Whereas, the smaller stuff, it's create a private Letterboxd where, 8 people can follow you and hear your takes. I don't know.
Good words of advice.
There's always been the criticism of the Sundance film, right? Of being a particular type. That's the kind of impression I get of Sundance. And I think, I don't know, after watching 20 plus films from this edition of Sundance, do you feel like that kind of archetype kind of holds water across the films that you've seen, or across a bunch of the films you've seen? Because to hopefully try and summarize the idea of it, I think a lot of, actually, I have no idea how to explain what a Sundance film is. It just is a way. I don't have the words for it right now off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, I think it roots back to the history of Sundance. Sundance has become a lot more international and global over time. And because of that, I think the origin of the Sundance movie that you might think of, whether it's Reservoir Dogs, Sex, Lies, Videotape, Junebug, a big example, Little Miss Sunshine, these are very white movies that have maybe a slightly dramatic but still more comedic tone, starring up-and-coming actors, or a bigger actor in a supporting role or something like that. And they follow. I think that Coda is an interesting example of a movie that reflects, I think, the past and future of Sundance in many ways. Of you could call something like that schmaltzy, you could call something like that a little bit cookie cutter, and how it wants you to feel, and maybe even a little bit manipulative in the trying to get you to cry at the end. But I also think that Coda is reflective of what Sundance is doing, I would say, better than ever, and probably better this year than I have ever seen, of just being more inclusive to a broader swath of voices. That even if, I would say, because the movies are all small, you might see some structural or narrative choices that kind of feel similar across a movie that could be made in Ireland and New Zealand or Africa, any part of the world. They all just, they look different, and they do feel different, and they do feel a little bit more independently made. There's a really interesting example, Ben, of what you're saying, is this movie that Randall Park directed called Shortcomings, based on a graphic novel that I'm blanking on the author's name, but that I enjoyed. And I would describe that movie as it's very 500 Days of Summer in tone, but all the lead characters are Asian, and it's very much about a kind of a grappling with ethnic and sexual identity. I didn't love the film. I certainly admired those elements of it because it makes it feel unique and personal, and I understand why someone made this. And for that to have a tone of a quote unquote Sundance movie that might have come out 20, 30 years ago, but just be told from a different perspective, I think is interesting. So I would say the state of independent cinema for a festival like Sundance, where it's how independent are half of these movies? It's going okay.
Nice. That's heartening to hear. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Russell, for coming on the podcast to have a quick chat about the movies that you saw at Sundance this year. It was a pleasure to have you, and hopefully it's not going to take 2 years for you to come back on the pod.
Agreed. Russell, is there anywhere that you want to point our listeners to online, perhaps to watch a certain recently released short film, which is excellent?
Oh, sure. I am at Russell, RUSSELL _ Goldman, GOLDMAN. On Instagram, I'm at Russell Goldman, spelled the same way, .com. You can go to either of those spots and check out some movies I've made. The most recent film I've released is about an 18-minute short film starring Alison Tolman about a delivery scam that gets really fucked up and personal. It's called Return to Sender.
Yeah.
I have some more stuff in the pipeline, bigger stuff, also smaller stuff. You can check it out all there. Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Russell. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review because that helps us keep making the show. Be sure to subscribe to us where you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. Keep up with Deep Cut on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod. You can join us to talk about movies on our Discord server, to which you'll find a link in the description. Thank you to Justina Yam for our beautiful artwork. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
And I'm Russell.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.